Live from the House of LeMay Makeup and Dressing Room.
Here comes Amber. Stop what you're doing. Here comes Amber. She's just doing what she can. Here comes Amber. Cue the spotlight. Here comes Amber with 2 drinks in her hand. The matriarch of fashion, secret sewer glasses, you can't look away. Ask her, does she do it? There's really nothing to it. She's got that feminine game. If you have a party, or if you're feeling naughty, call up the House of LeMay. Here comes your favorite gal. Here comes your queen. Here comes the talk of town. And we're live tonight. The music starts playing. It's time for cabaret. And we're live tonight.
As usual, Donald Trump is in court this week, sleeping and farting his way through his election fraud case, as the rest of us listen to the testimony from people such as David Pecker. Pecker, the former publisher of National Enquirer, stood firm and erect as he testified about his involvement in the suppression of the Stormy Daniels thing. Porn star who actually admitted to having sex with Trump.
Ew!
1,000 naked gay men in the Poconos.
Tell me how you got started.
Well, it was a dare. A lot of us had happened with a dare. Of course, when you're much younger when this happens, usually. For me, I didn't start dragging until I was 54. And I went to a vacation. 1,000 naked gay men in the Poconos. And my first time. And I loved it. I mean, I loved the cabins and all that stuff. And there was a gay disco. There was Mr. Leather and Miss Lace and all these things happening. I loved it. So I went to the drag contest, and it was pretty bad.
Trump is charged with falsifying business records to cover up the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels, which I think is freaking hilarious. Prosecutor Matthew Colangelo said it was election fraud, pure and simple. The defendant, Donald Trump, orchestrated a criminal scheme to corrupt the 2016 presidential election. And while Trump attorney Todd Blanche retorted, President Trump is innocent. President Trump did not commit any crimes. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office should never have brought this case. Which is further proof that Trump has run out of attorneys who aren't pussies.
Hey, Duane Scott Cerny here, and oh boy, we got another great Amber Live show for you. Jay Claypool is a new author with a fascinating new book, and Amber's going to be interviewing him and telling you all about him, and he's going to be answering some questions that Amber throws at him, which will be quite interesting. So buckle up, because he's going to be flying. Also on the show, of course, is our beloved Rocco, and Lord knows what he's going to do, and Boog and Shoog. But first, you're going to have to sit through this next guest who's going to tell you this week's news briefs. This week, all tanked up edition. So a 9-year-old boy from Edmond, Oklahoma wanted a pet octopus. His parents, as parents will do, gave him a toy octopus, which only satisfied the tyke for a while, most likely by terrorizing his sister and her ponytails. The boy's father, a 36-year-old dentist who was used to exploring creepy cavities, worked with a local aquarium store and found Terrence, a 2-spotted California octopus. Suddenly, an 8-legged TikTok star was born, with the father narrating Terrence's exploits using a fake British accent, because, you know, Brits just sound smarter. Soon, hundreds of thousands of people were following Terrence, and not just for fashion tips, his political rants, or his incredible dance moves. However, only weeks after being fished from obscurity, it was discovered that Terrence had been a female octopus all along, fooling the internet with his many legs of trousers and a beard, just like closeted Hollywood movie stars. And to further complicate matters, Terrence then laid over 50 eggs that the family assumed were unfertilized. Weeks later, tiny, almost transparent octopus babies were hatched. Yes, as Frank Sinatra had predicted, that lady octopus was a tramp. The fatherless kids are named Rocket Larry, Squid Cootie, Swib Shady, JC, Ciance, and Calamari. I just threw that in. In a related tankful story, Charlotte, a stingray the size of a serving platter used at upscale bar mitzvahs, hasn't shared a tank of water with a male of her species in at least 8 years. Always a bridesmaid, etc. Yet, in a North Carolina aquarium, Charlotte, the stingray, birthed 4 pups. Yes, they're called pups. In a process called parthenogenesis, a sexual reproduction from an unfertilized egg. There is no genetic contribution by a male, no financial contribution from deadbeat stingray dads either. In an apparent move to dodge being called an old maid in her Sex and the City stingray circles, Charlotte impregnated herself without a man, making herself both a stingray suffragette and an upcoming guest on the Maury Povich Show. Republicans, of course, are outraged, as there must be a punishment for getting knocked up, even if it's by oneself. The idea has been floated, that Charlotte should pay hush money to herself, a scheme of bait and tackle and switch and catch and kill. The National Enquirer, now the official paper of record for the RNC, expressed an interest in the idea, but only if Charlotte agreed to appear as a centerfold in its annual seafood edition. Headline, Trump's Loch Ness love nest exposed in fake FBI stingray scandal of misconception. Seafood photos inside. And that's the news in my briefs. Well, was that funny? I'm not sure. You decide. But you know what? Who really should decide? Russell. Let's get him in here.
Oops. Hey, Duane. How are you?
Hey, Russell.
And we're on the wrong side. There we go.
Oh,
I know. Craziness. It's just been a wild week.
Certainly has.
Yes, you're back in Chicago, and my New York adventures continued, and it just never ends here.
It's the life of the wicked.
Yes. Well, I know tonight's guest has been promoting the show, so we probably have some people who have never watched before. So what we do want to tell them is that if they aren't watching on YouTube, that's the best place to watch. And the reason for that is you go to youtube.com/AmberLive and you're watching in full HD, and you also get a great chat room, and lots of our regulars are there, will be there, and we hope you'll join us if you aren't already there, and make lots of comments, talk to us, ask questions. If we're lucky, Jay Claypool might even pop into the chat. It's always fun to have the chat going in addition to the show. And then after the show, you can go check us out on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and even don't forget our great website, amberlive.tv. And that's just full of stuff. Lots of things you can read, lots of old interviews. I call them old, but they're still great. And lots of information and a great store. But if you can't watch Amber, Duane, do you know what you can do?
You can. No, what can you do?
You can listen to her in your car on the way to work. The other way to take in Amber is with the Amber Live interviews, because I turn all our interviews into a podcast and put them out there on Tuesday after the show. So go check out the Amber Live interviews, and then you can just listen to Amber whenever you want. So that's a great way to do it as well.
She's everywhere.
She is. And you know what keeps her everywhere, Duane?
Bustiers.
The bustiers. Yes, I love our bustiers. And we do always ask you to help us out, because there are lots of bills to this. We have some great bustiers, but we always need more, because those bills, like the website, the StreamYard, everything's got a cost. So please make a donation. Use that Venmo at RJD Pro, or go to the credit card. Go use your credit card at amberlive.tv. Look for the donate button. We do love our bustiers, and I will say thank you to everyone who's been a bustier over the 5 seasons that we've been streaming Amber out there. So tonight, what?
I said, 5 seasons.
I know. And this is our 193rd show tonight. So it's crazy. The big 200's coming up if we can keep Amber propped up long enough. So tonight's guest, and you've mentioned it before, is Jay Claypool. And Jay was in the Air Force for 20 years. And he also is a drag queen. So you're going to hear all about Jay, his adventures, the things he did. And it turns out that if you remember, we had a Secret Service member on who was flying with Michelle Obama. It turns out that they kind of knew each other a little bit. Jay recognized him from his picture, and they had both worked on the same flights with the Obamas back in the day. So It's pretty amazing. It's a small world out there, but his new book, Gay AF, is pretty incredible. And what stories? You're going to hear a little bit of it tonight. So let's get on with our guest.
Jay Claypool served over 20 years in the United States Air Force, all the while performing as drag queen Dixie Crystal. Claypool's account of his life, called Gay AF, and if you don't know what AF means, Google is your friend, has recently hit the bookshelves. The book is a collection of stories that are hilarious, heartbreaking, and at times surreal, and recounts his early years as a nightclub performer, the 9/11 tragedy, and how it propelled him into the military. Let's take a look at Dixie doing her thing.
They tell me it's soft to touch and really smooth.
We got married in a fever, hotter than a pepper sprout. We've been talking about Jackson ever since the fire went out. I'm going to Jackson, I'm going to mess around. Yeah, I'm going to Jackson, look out Jackson Town. Well, go on down to Jackson.
Jay Claypool, come on in.
Hello.
Hi there. Oh my gosh, those were some boots you were wearing there.
They are not comfortable at all.
I can attest to that as well. All right, Jay, when did you first realize you were gay AF?
Oh, Jesus. I think as soon as I was able to put a complete sentence together. I'm from rural Georgia, right? And so when I was a kid, in the 80s, in the 70s, even, that sounds so nasty coming out of my mouth. But there was never an adjective for fluid people when I was a kid, right? I always knew that I was attracted to everybody, beautiful people, anyone. And that made me very different in a very religious, conservative Southern household. And so I left very early. My mother found that I was gay. I got turned out when I was 15. And I was lucky enough to meet a group of trans drag performers who really raised me, until I decided to join the Air Force, and that became my family. And so, I've been sort of on that trajectory ever since. I've never been close to any of my family, but lucky enough to have made some very specific choices about who I'm close to, and the way that I was brought up.
It was mentioned that 9/11 had an impact on you. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. I had come home from a show. I was asleep, and my friend Robert, who's also a drag queen in Augusta, Georgia, called me and said, "Turn your television on right now." And I did, and it was just in time to see the second tower fall. And that was such a watershed moment for me. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do? What's happening? What are we going to do? And I thought about it, and I was a nightclub performer in Augusta, Georgia, which is a tiny town. I knew if I stayed there, I was never going to leave. And so I got up enough nerve. I was a performer. I would shave my eyebrows off. I went to an Air Force recruiter with no eyebrows, acrylic nail glue on my fingernails, and said, "Sign me up, send me to boot camp. I want to do whatever I can, and be a part of this thing that is about to begin." And I did. Showed up to boot camp, still no eyebrows, nail glue on my fingernails, and it was. I thought it was going to be a bit messy, and it was for a few days, but overall, it was the best decision that I've ever made.
What kind of drag were you doing before you entered the Air Force? Well, how would you define your act?
I have always billed myself as a rock and roll showgirl, but I started at 15 working the spotlight for a drag show before I ever thought about being in drag. And the first performer I ever saw, her name was Tacoma Youngblood, and she came out in a priest robe and did Missionary Man by Annie Lennox, and she set a Bible on fire and threw burning Bible pages into the audience. And it was the best thing I had ever seen. And I said, I want to do that, and I can do that, right? And that's how it all started for me. I was lucky enough to get roped into this troupe of legendary Southern drag queens, Charlie Brown, Lily White, all of these Atlanta girls, because that's where I'm from. And they showed me how to be how to do what they did at a young age, a really young age.
How often were you performing?
5 nights a week. 5 nights a week. And we would do, the show would run from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. So you would do 5 sets, 2 numbers in each set. So you would be on stage you're on stage for 8 minutes at a time, and you did that 5 times. But back in those days, this is the late 90s, early 2000s. Back in those days, you would leave the bar with not quite $1,000 in your pocket, and back then that was a good living.
Well, I think right today, leaving a night with $1,000 would be pretty good as well. So what was the reaction in when you joined the Air Force? Because that was still the time of don't ask, don't tell, wasn't it?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I was lucky. I was lucky that I never really had a problem pretending to be a straight man, right? And I never really had a need to go to work and tell everybody I worked with I was gay, because I've never been a person that hangs out with people that I work with after work. But I would see a lot of people that I knew had a hard time, and I knew that they struggled because of things that they had no control over. So I lived that life for the first half of my career, and then I was lucky enough to be in DC when that repeal happened. And there was a huge party downtown in DC at the K Street Lounge. Nancy Pelosi was there, and somebody called me, and I was flying a mission. I had just landed. I was still in my flight suit, and somebody called me and said, "Get to the K Street Lounge right now." I was the only other. There was a Marine there in his dress blues, and I was the only other person in uniform. And so they smashed us together behind Nancy Pelosi. But it's a huge moment. And the way that I think just lifted the weight off of so many people's shoulders that couldn't control the perception of who they were. I've been very lucky, but I worked with so many people that were not as lucky.
Now, before that time, were you getting any feedback or blowback from people who were saying, "Boy, I couldn't do that when I was your age"?
Oh, of course. Of course. I was still performing, and my first base was Albuquerque, New Mexico. But because it was Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? I could never leave the base and drag. I could never come back to the base and drag. So I would have to go get a hotel room downtown. I would take all of my stuff with me. I'd get ready in that hotel room. I would go to the bar, which back then was called the Pulse. It was the twin bar to the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. And I would do a show, have a great time. I would sleep in the hotel room, and then I would go back the next day after I had taken everything off. Because if I had gotten caught with any of that, at that point, it's not even a don't ask, don't tell issue. We're going to put you out.
Prevalent was homosexual activity before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was rescinded.
What was the question?
How rampant, not rampant, but how much gay activity was going on in the military undercover, so to speak? Oh,
I'd love to say that you'd be surprised, but I doubt you would be. When I first got to DC, before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I would make it a point to get to know everybody before I told them that I was gay. And I had a commander once who was an officer who approached me on a mission and said, "My wife wants to watch me bottom for a man. Are you willing to be that man?" And he was beautiful. He was oh, Jesus, he was hot. And I said to him, I'm sure that your career could survive this if your wife got mad, but mine can't. So the answer is no, unfortunately. I don't have many regrets in my life, but that is certainly one of them.
What type of activity were you doing in the Air Force? Not not sexually, but what was your official duty?
I mean, we can go either way.
I've heard that about you.
You have video of me. You may have heard a few things too. I started as an airplane mechanic. I was a C-130 electrician. I then became an engine mechanic. I had enough of New Mexico. I spent some time as a survival school instructor. And when I had enough of that, I came to DC to be a flying chef. And so I've spent the majority of my career here, flying everybody from the president all the way down the cabinet members, everyone in DC. And when I retired as a chef.
What presidents did you serve?
So only Obama. I spent 5 years on Air Force One with President Obama. He's the only one that I served directly. We would fly Bush and Clinton every now and then. But the only president that I worked for a considerable amount of time was Obama.
Did he like your food?
He did. I gravitate to low country cooking. I would put my shrimp and grits and my banana pudding up against any other chef on the planet Earth, and those are the two things that he would ask specifically from me.
Where did you get your cooking experience or your knowledge?
At the CIA in Poughkeepsie, New York.
The CIA, I'm sorry.
I was lucky enough, the Culinary Institute of America, lucky enough the Air Force sent me to culinary school.
How fascinating. Now, do you use that in today?
I do not. I recently transitioned. I'm retired. I was producing events for the Kennedy Center for a living, which was great for a year. It was super stressful, and it did not offer me enough money at the end of the day to carry the weight of that stress. So I quit, and I serve. I bartend at a local restaurant where I also do a drag show, and I enjoy that dynamic, I think, a bit more. It's a much more tight-knit, much more family centered group dynamic, and I gravitate to that, I think. So much happier and making the same money with less stress.
Good. All right, we're going to hear more about Jay Claypool's book, Gay AF, right after this break.
Didn't we tell you that would be an incredible interview? Yeah, and it's going to be wait. There's more. But first, let's bring Russell back in.
Hey, Duane, this is a great interview. Jay was wonderful to chat with, and there's so much more to come. But first, I want to tell everyone that there is one other way. I mentioned the bustiers earlier. Let's not forget them. You can always become a bustier and help us out. But the other thing you can do is head on over to amberlive.tv and look for our merch. We've got a great store over there. It's full of items. You can get stuff with Amber on it, with Rusty Peen. You can get Rocco. There's lots of LGBTQ items. And Duane has a great collection of fantastic Vintage Confidential t-shirts up there. So like this hoodie, and you can get this hoodie at amberlive.tv. So head on over, just look for the merch or the shop for merch button, and you can get the hoodie, and there's so much more. You won't believe the amount of stuff we have. So go on over and check out that store. And now, what are we going to do next, Duane?
We're going to hear the second part of the interview.
Yes, we are.
We're back with Jay Claypool talking about his book, Gay AF. All right, Jay, what prompted you to write a book?
It really was. It was the same guy that shot the cover, my friend Joe. We were sitting in his living room one night, and I was telling a story that took place when I was a kid, way before the military. And after that story, he said to me, "You have so many of these stories. You should write a book." And I had thought about that before, and I had never really given it any real attention. And I went home and I thought about it some more. And I knew a friend of mine, Jim Greenhill, had written a novel, and I asked his opinion. I said, "Hey, what was this like for you?" And he gave me, the only advice he gave me was, he said, "Get up 2 hours early, write as much as you can, and the next day, spend one of those 2 hours revising what you've written the day before, and then keep going." And I did that for a year. I've never thought of myself as a bad writer, but I really started with no direction. I didn't know where I wanted to take people, what stories I wanted to tell. So it became a goal for me, right? Once I got 30 pages in, all right, let's get to 60, let's get to 90. let's get to 100, and 350 pages later, and a year later, I had a cohesive sort of group of stories that is also autobiographical. And so at that point, it was just figuring out how to sell it to somebody.
There's that cover you were talking about. Beautiful cover.
That's it. Joe is a genius. He's very good at what he does. I do not speak technology in any way. And so I'm so happy to either rely on the kindness of others who can, or pay, because I could never do anything like that. But yeah, it really was Joe dared me to write a book, and I did.
Very good. Could you read a passage from your book for us?
How long of a passage would you like me to read?
Oh,
what are the limits?
2-3 minutes.
2 or 3? Okay. Let me.
Your book out on audio?
I'm working on it right now.
Okay, well, this is a good practice.
Right. So this is me as a kid with my grandmother in church, right? And I loved going to church with my grandmother. So in my old age, organized religion seems a bit ridiculous to me, though I've always been much more spiritual than agnostic. But in those days, I loved those Sunday morning excursions with my Gma. She was like a celebrity. Everyone would flock to her with gossip. She would mingle with the cliques of women, never denying anyone the opportunity to catch up. We would chat with the pastor and his wife for a bit, and we would take our place somewhere in the first several rows of the church pews before the service began. The older women around me all dressed the same, some much gaudier than others, and they all perfumed themselves with something from the Elizabeth Taylor luxury collection. They showered me with attention as if I was one of them. The music was always upbeat and heavy-hitting as a reflection of world and political events. I remember always immersing myself in the sensory overload of all of the entire experience until the sermon started. Diagnoses were never given for many of the common ailments that plague people today back when I was a kid, so ADD was rarely a thing. But I was quick to be distracted, and nothing set my mind running 1,000 miles a minute like the monotone, melodramatic, and all too drawn-out Sunday sermon of a Baptist minister. Sitting through them was agony. I'd have to find something to focus my attention on, and this particular afternoon, it was my duty to inspect the antique benches keeping the congregation from sitting on the floor. The quality of the wood was fine enough, even though stain and varnish had begun to chip over decades of use. I began to notice small splinters where fragments of wood had begun to separate along the rounded tops of the pews. I concluded that this was a wear pattern resulting from the constant standing and sitting throughout every church service, noting that some of the older members of the congregation used the tops of the pews like Olympic beams to move themselves around in the place of what should have been a cane. I was sitting directly behind my Gma when I saw a splinter of wood on the top of the pew right below her neck. I also happened to notice 2 long strands of synthetic hair that had fallen out of the back of her wig. You can probably see where this is going. My little fingers couldn't resist the urge, so I stuck my hands forward and tied the 2 longer pieces of hair, looping them through the space offered by the broken wood splintered from the pew. I don't know what I thought would happen, but in my wildest dreams, I can assure you, it was not what transpired. I like to think that I was half expecting her to lean forward a bit, realize her hair was caught, reach back, break the attachment, and continue with the dull drum worship service that I was praying would soon conclude. My prayers were answered. The preacher gave the invocation, instructed everyone to stand up for a hymn, and in what has become a constant theme in my life, everything went into slow motion. Betty Jean Williams stood up, determined to sing her heart out in a proclamation of her profound love and adoration for her Lord and Savior, but her wig stayed firmly attached to the pew. Before she could even grab the spine of the hymnal, she realized that she was wearing only a stocking cap. And I will stop right there. If you want to know the rest of the story, you can buy the book. I was a bad kid.
No.
I tied my grandmother's wig to the church pew in Sunday service, and it went downhill very fast.
Some of the other topics of the chapters. So
it's sketchy, right? Every chapter is AF. So it starts off with country AF, and that's me growing up. Queer AF, me discovering that I'm gay. Fabulous AF is me becoming a drag queen, putting myself in drag for the first time. Blue AF is my entry into the Air Force. Presidential AF was my time with Obama. And it goes through several. It's all AF, and it ends with current AF. And so the last chapter, I wanted you to be able to pick it up, turn to any chapter and read it, and not have to have read everything before it, right? So it reads that way. It's chronological throughout my life, but current AF is just, it's all the random stories that I wanted to tell people that I couldn't weave into the rest of the book.
All right. We have some pictures to show. Let's watch those and have Jay give us a conversation about them.
Sure. That is me and my Coast Guard friend, Mandy Harris. We were both in culinary school together. And I think that's the end of it. We're in our blue. So that was graduating from culinary school as brand new chefs. She still to this day is my favorite chef in the military. Her job, she works on Coast Guard cutters. So she spends most of her time on these small ships in the Arctic whose only job is to break up icebergs. And she cooks only for the crew. And that to me sounds like one of the most amazing things. Like how do I sign up, right? Like send me there.
Someone's got to do it.
Of course. And she has a great time. She loves it. Oh, look at that handsome fellow. That's me in my mess dress. Going to a ball. That's me and my friend Kevin at a local bar. That's me on Friday the 13th as Beetlejuice. You can't tell because it's black and white, but that is me and Miss Casey Beyonce at number 9 in DC. That's me at I host a monthly show called Cub Country, which is actually tomorrow night here in DC. That's me at one of those shows. And the flyer for it. I don't know who that gal is, but that's me in a great wig. Those are my 2 drag children. That is Pirouette on the left and Orpheus Rose on the right. At Hank's Oyster Bar, and that again is me at the gay rodeo in Salt Lake City. Not what I expected. Salt Lake City was not what I expected. I expected it to be very conservative, and everyone there was so receptive to what we were doing there. It was great.
Over the past years, we've highlighted the attacks of drag queens and Drag Queen Story Hour and the laws being passed around the country condemning those actions. Mm-hmm. Have you experienced any of that?
I mean, everybody in DC does. We have a local queen, Tara Hoot, who does a story time event at multiple bars. And she's one of the only ones. We don't have a lot of that in DC, but she does most of those, and she travels around the city. And she, to this day, the venues where she performs at will still get bomb threats and open harassment threats. And, you know, I've dealt with that my whole life. I remember as a kid in one of the first Macon, Georgia Pride parades, being in that parade and people throwing bricks at us in the parade. So it's not something that's foreign to me. I've been through it before. I just think now, like in 2024, it's ridiculous. Like, why, if the fact that I'm gay affects one of 2 people in a relationship, then whoever me being gay affects is also gay, right? That's your problem. So just come get in the fucking parade with me. Like, let's all have a good time. But yeah, we have a lot of it in DC.
So what are you doing now? You said you bartend, you host shows, but what do you see in the future? You're still a young man.
Well, I promised my publisher another book, so that's in the works. I'm gonna record the audio version of Gay AF, and then we'll see. We'll see what's next. I really have my sights set on Chicago. I love the city of Chicago. I've been in DC for 20 years, and that's 19 years too long. So I want to take myself somewhere I've never been, and just sort of start over, right? And reinvent myself and see what's next. Meet new people, make a new sort of niche for myself.
Well, we've had many guests from the Chicago area, so we can hook you up. All right,
I love Chicago. It's the muscle bear capital of the world, and that's exactly where I should be.
How can people get your book?
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon in Kindle format. It's on Amazon in paperback. You can go to Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble has it as well. And if you stay tuned for the next 3 or 4 weeks, you will be able to get it in an audio format. And it will be me reading my own stories to you.
How exciting. Well, congratulations, Jay. Great story. I'm glad you put it out there for us to share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Didn't we tell you that would be something special? Do we ever disappoint? Don't answer that question. Next up, Rocco Zamboni.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you're Rocco Zamboni, aren't you?
You're damn right.
I love the phone app, Ask Rocco Zamboni. I have it here on my phone.
Wow, Amber, that's great that you got that thing.
You know who I am?
Are you kidding me? Amber LeMay from the House of LeMay? I got your phone app right here. Ask some drag queens. I freaking love this thing.
Well, your app has helped me many times when I have a difficult question to ask, such as, should I kiss Rocco?
Go ahead, give it a try.
Oh, hold on there, princess. Yo, Amber, should I be running for the hills?
If the conditions are right.
Yeah.
Am I too much of a woman for Rocco?
Definitely not.
Why don't we ask one of your friends? Hey, Marguerite, what should I do about this thing?
Just click your heels together 3 times, then run as fast as you can.
Will I ever get Rocco?
Trust me, it ain't gonna happen.
Oh, that Rocco gets me every time. But wait, I think we're still missing something. Oh, that's right. We're missing Boog and Shoog.
What's so funny, Shoog?
I just heard the funniest joke I've ever heard.
Oh my gosh, I want to hear it.
I don't know if you can handle it, Boog. It's that funny.
Oh, I can handle it. Tell me, tell me.
This may actually be the funniest joke ever told. People have waited their whole lives to tell such a funny joke.
Oh, dear God in hot dog heaven, tell me the joke.
It actually may be too funny to tell. Dangerous even.
If you don't tell me this joke, I'm gonna explode.
Okay, I warned you. So, a priest, a rabbi, and a stripper walk into a bar, and the stripper says to the bartender,